Everyone. My name is Alec. I study at Berkeley, and today I'd like to share some relaxation techniques and study strategies. Oh. So, right off the bat, I like to just say that these are things that work for me, although they may need to be adapted for you. So just explore these concepts, and I am confident that they will um, be helpful for you if you adapt them for yourself. All right, so what is brain training? I really love this meme. I was playing a brain training game. All I got better at was the brain training game, and yeah, there's a lot of kind of hocus pocus going around about brain training. For example, I think we've all heard of the Mozart effect, and that came out of a study that was exploring the uh, effects of effects of music on our visual spatial processing. And so the results what they found in that study was that listening to classical music might help to prime the brain for visual spatial processing. So not necessarily, uh, help you to do it, but it might help to prime the brain to do it. But what was translated to the public was music makes you smarter. And so a whole like multi-billion-dollar industry was born out of that slight misconception. And so to put that all aside, I like to call it just conscious neuroplasticity. Now, what is that? Basically, the brain is always changing. It's always observing, taking in new information, and changing itself accordingly. And so we can kind of customize that learning. Also, another thing is learning how to learn using skill acquisition concepts, which is basically breaking down skills into more bite-sized pieces that you can, so you can better understand it and develop your skill in that way. For example, say you want to learn how to juggle, and you're like, all right, I'm going to juggle. So you just take like 10 balls and you just start trying to do it right away. And that's like jumping into the deep end without doing, the first levels. And who knows, that might work, but it's much easier when you break down a concept and uh, into smaller pieces so that you can better develop your skill in that. And also memory techniques, which for me makes life so much easier. Um, I think this is really cool because sometimes when we're trying to remember something, it's almost like, oh, what was that? Like trying to grasp into thin air for something. But with these memory techniques, it's almost like reaching into your filing cabinet and picking out something and being like, oh, here it is. So I think that's really cool, and we're gonna explore that stuff. All right, so what we're gonna go through is the first part's gonna be a relaxation technique, and then also a sensory training thing where you you're learning how to use your eyes in a different way. And then the second part is going to be how to use SMARCLES in your own studies. I think we're all familiar with using SMARCLES for our patients in the treatment process. However, have you ever used SMARCLES in your own studies or in your own life? Um, I find that it's much easier. It makes things much easier when you break things down in that way into a very specific and measurable and attainable goal. And then the memory technique, which is called the PEG method, which I find to be very useful. All right, so really quick, again, this is something that works for me, and it might not necessarily work for you, but it's just to give you the idea that posture is something that really helps, because if you're slouching, that's putting a lot of tension on your body that wouldn't you don't that doesn't really help you. And so what I do is that I find that sometimes I sit on my lower back, and also my shoulders are slouched a little bit. And so all I do is I sit up my lower back, and then pull my shoulder blades toward my spine and then down. And a really cool visual for this that I find that helps me is to imagine that you have suspenders on, and your suspenders in the back are connected to your shoulder blades. So all you have to do is pull your suspenders up, and then your shoulder blades are in place. And posture, it's not about like puffing out your chest. It's more about just training your body so that it's in a nice, relaxed structure. And again, this is something that's trained. If you've never used these muscles before, then they're probably rather weak and underdeveloped. So remember to be gentle and be patient. And the goal is to be relaxed in your posture. And just be, again, it's training. So be persistent with it. And also listen to your body and be fluid. For example, well, also the conceptions that we have on how our body works really affects how we use our body and how what our experience is in that way. For example, there's the phrase the rib cage, and I don't really like the phrase the rib cage because it has the conception that it's a more tight and structure thing, but really the ribs are is I like to see it more like a wave. Um, so yeah, I think it really helps to be aware of the posture in that way. And then really quick, meditation. There are many different types of meditation. Um, Many different ways to go about it. But for me, it's all about awareness, just practicing awareness of the thoughts that come through your mind, awareness of the feelings in your body, the things around you, the things inside of you, etc. And it's really important to accept yourself where you are. And I really don't mean that in a philosophical way. I mean, like, you need to accept yourself and not judge your thoughts because your thoughts will indicate what your axiomatic presuppositions are and how they affect your experience. So instead of trying to push away the thoughts, just simply observe the thoughts. And I think that's the biggest misconception is that people need people think they need to completely silence their mind, which is not necessarily true. Well, I think for a beginner, it's more important just to be aware of the thoughts. And as you observe your thought process, your perspectives, your conceptions about what life is and how the world works, um, again, it affects your experience. And so, what we can do, excuse me, is we can actively change our thoughts to serve us better. And in this way, it's really cool because instead of being inside of your thoughts and therefore subject to them, you are kind of above your thoughts and therefore you can observe them and you can control them. So here's a simple example. Say you're a young kid and you want to be an artist. So you go to your parents, mom and dad, I want to be a musician when I grow up. And they're like, oh no, this is going to be really hard for you. You're probably not going to make money. You better have a fallback, et cetera, et cetera. And it's true. It's really hard to monetize creativity. But the thing though is that say the kid says, okay, I'm going to do it anyway. So they go about it. And if they have that preconception that it's going to be really hard and they're probably not going to succeed, maybe they have one foot in and one foot out. And it's really hard to succeed in anything if you have one foot out. And say they really want to succeed. However, it's not happening because they're not fully in it. And they don't realize that they have that unconscious presupposition that they're probably not going to succeed. So I hope that makes sense. And the last thing is to treat yourself like a puppy. I like this way of thinking. Is puppies are absolutely crazy and they're just bouncing off the walls. They're just going everywhere. They're chewing on everything, peeing on everything you love. And when a puppy misbehaves, you might say like, oh, bad puppy, but you don't like condemn the puppy for being a bad person, right? That's just what puppies do. And so I like to look at myself in the same way, where whenever I lose focus, whenever I make a mistake, instead of judging myself in that way, just gently redirect myself. And that's for me all what meditation is. It's awareness and gently redirecting yourself after you lose focus. All right, so for part one, we're going to go through the relaxation technique. For me, this is a long-term thing where, if you need to like perform right now and you're nervous, then it might not necessarily help. But if you do this just a little bit every day, like 5 minutes, even like 10, 30 seconds every day, I believe it really will help you to learn how to maintain your nervous system in your stress response so that you can be more relaxed in a stressful situation. And then a visual training exercise for me, which is a really useful way of using our visual sense. All right, so really quick, the vagus nerve is fascinating nerve. There's a lot going on there, and the polyvagal theory is really cool too. But all we need to know for this presentation is that the vagus nerve is the main part of the relaxation response. And when we breathe out, it slows the heart rate. When we breathe in, our heart rate increases. So that's the sympathetic and then the parasympathetic activation. And that's all we need to know for this presentation. All right, so this is a really simple exercise. I think everyone knows how to find their pulse, but in case you don't, you go to your thumb, follow the thumb down onto the wrist, and the bone on the wrist, you'll find your pulse. If you can't find that, you can go on your carotid, which is go to your earlobe and then down the jawline, and then you should be able to find your pulse on your neck there. And so I like to use the wrist. So as you read your heartbeat, simply breathe in for 3 seconds and then breathe out for 5. And you might observe, oh, I'm sorry, go back 1 second. The heart rate variability is like I said, when it increases and it decreases when you breathe in and out. So when you breathe in for 3 and then out for 5, just simply observe your heart rate. And as you breathe out, what I like to do is relax my muscles as much as possible and like really imagine it and feel it. Also, what I like to do is do a really soft ah, but under my breath, as kind of like if you're fogging your glasses to clean them. So it's like, and just relax your muscles as much as possible. And so what you might observe is that heart rate variability where your heart rate will slow as you breathe out. And if you're not observing that, that's totally okay, because for me, I noticed that if I breathe out, but I'm not really relaxing myself, it doesn't slow as much as it usually does. So this is a practice. And I really like this because it gives you, reading your heart rate gives you like a real-time biofeedback of what's going on in your nervous system. So I hope that makes sense. All right. So with the sensory training, I find this really interesting. So basically, the practice is to relax the muscles around the eyes. And if you want, you could massage the muscles around your eyes, like massage your forehead, your temples, all around. Because sometimes the muscles can get locked in tension. And then soften your gaze, meaning relaxing your actual eye muscles. And then look 10 to 20 feet in front of you. And fix your gaze on one object, but don't focus on that. Instead, focus on the entire view. And this might be kind of a weird way of operating if you've never done it before, but I find it super useful because focusing on one object, don't get me wrong, it's really useful when we need to do it. However, at the same time, it's like looking through a tunnel. And say you're walking on the street, you know, if you're walking on the street, it's much more useful to have a peripheral view instead of looking through a tunnel. And so when I practice this, I'm looking in front of me and I see the picture on the wall. I see the table over here. I see the window on this side. And for me, the practice has been to learn how to recognize objects farther and farther away. into my periphery. And I find this to be really useful in reading too, because when I'm reading, instead of like focusing very in very small, I'm sorry, focusing in a very narrow way to increase your periphery so that you can see more and recognize more words in your view. This is one of the tools that is recommended in speed reading. Also, by the way, one thing that helps is to, when you're looking around, not to just simply observe and acknowledge things around you. And instead of saying, that's a window, that's a painting, that's my coffee cup, etc. Don't say those words because that's subvocalization, meaning speaking in your inside of your head. Just practice observing them without the words, which again might be kind of a strange practice, but it's super helpful. All right, so these two things, um, the relaxation part especially, I find to be really useful before I study or before I perform, because it helps you to get into a state of calm before you do that. And it's useful because, when we're studying, when we're speaking or whatever, it's much harder to think if we are anxious or stressed. Um, and so if you do this a little bit every day, it will help you to learn how to maintain your nervous system in that way. All right, so the part two is we're going to go over how to use SMART goals in your personal development and then the memory technique. All right, so I think that oftentimes, studying music and all the things we need to know as music therapy students, there's a lot of information. It can get very overwhelming very quick. And so what I like to do is take a concept and break it down, like I said, into smaller steps so that it's much easier for us to acquire that skill. So for example, take the goal to be able to sight read on guitar. Sight reading is a very demanding cognitive activity. There's a lot going on there. And so, you could just like jump straight into the deep end and start uh, 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 practicing these things or start practicing just with everything at once. However, I find it much easier if you break it down into smaller parts so that you can um, digest them much more easily. And a big part of sight reading on guitar is, you have to identify the note and then on the paper and then identify the note where it is on the guitar. And so if you have a map of all the notes on the guitar, it makes it much easier for you to find those notes. Excuse me. And so this is one objective could be to identify all the C major notes on the sixth string on cue within a week. So you're just spending a week on one string and just observing and identifying all the notes there and then memorizing where they are. So you could go through this many different ways and you can use your creativity. You could go through just being like, okay, open string, that's an E, and then first fret, that's an F. And there's no note in between E and F, so that's why it's a half step. And then G, third fret, A, fifth fret. And I'm just kind of like giving you the meta commentary of what might be going through my head when I'm going through and memorizing these notes. And it really helps to get maybe some flashcards so that you pull a random note, say it's a B. Okay, I know that's the seventh fret. And after a while, it'll just be like, no problem. I know exactly where that B is. And I realized that spending an entire week on one string may be kind of monotonous. So, just make it work for you. You can change it up. You can work on different goals every day or whatever. But my point is that you break it down so that and eventually when you do with every single string, again, you have a map of the matrix on the guitar so that you don't need to spend the time searching for the note on the guitar. So I hope that makes sense. By the way, if anyone has any, oh yeah, I can't really see the chat, I don't think, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to jump in. All right, so this is the memory technique. For me, I find it super useful. And it basically goes like this. You have 10 pegs, almost like on a coat rack, and you're taking information and attaching it to each one of those pegs. So first you have to memorize these 10 things. And then what you do later is that you attach any information you want to memorize onto these 10 things. So first, just go through these 10 things. I recommend you write these down. Excuse me, write these down, and excuse me. And I think after maybe just like a couple days, you'll have these memorized. So 1, sun, 2, socks, and these are images that you're attaching to each number. 3 is tree because it rhymes with tree. 4 is car. 5 is hand, etc. So let me show you how this works. Say these are the first 3 parts of the Bill of Rights. And so the first thing is freedom of press. So how do I memorize the first Bill of Rights? Let's see. So freedom of press, you might say a newspaper. So I imagine a sun on the newspaper. And just that simple association there helps me to remember, number 1, freedom of press. And then number 2 is the right to bear arms. Okay, and number 2 is socks. So how do I associate those two? Say maybe a bear with socks on their arm, so to speak. And also, the more ridiculous the image is, the better, because it stands out to the brain more. Like seeing a purple elephant would be much more memorable than seeing a normal elephant. The third one is no quartering soldiers. And here you can just imagine, just use your creativity, maybe just a bunch of quarters spilling out of the trunk of the tree or something like that. Again, I know it sounds ridiculous, but these ridiculous images actually this stuff. And then you can create pegs for like 100 things if you want to memorize all these things. And again, it's all about attaching information to images, and you want to use as much senses as possible. You want to elaborate, maybe make a story out of it. And this all helps you to memorize it because you have something tangible that you can attach the information to. And that's why I say it's like reaching into your filing cabinet instead of grasping in thin air to remember something. All right, so this, again, like, use your creativity with this. It's something that everything that I gave you was more abstract kind of instructions. And so you can take this information and tailor it to your own practice. And also another thing I find really useful is, in Victor Wooten's first book, he was saying something like, I'm trying really hard, but it's not working. And so his friend said, try easy. And I love that so much because sometimes we tense ourselves up so much, and that really makes it difficult to focus or function or to memorize or remember something. And if you practice relaxing yourself, then it's much easier to function in every way. And this stuff was largely informed by the polyvagal theory by Stephen Porges, a really good book called The Body Keeps the Score. Limitless, which is Jim Kwik is kind of like a brain training, mental training type of coach. And then Victor Wooten's books are really amazing to me, The Music Lesson and The Spirit of Music. So I recommend those readings. Ooh. So I realize that might have been a lot of information. Does anyone have any questions?
I just want to say I love this presentation. I see a lot of traces of your knowledge of CBT and ACT,
Mm,
and I think you utilize that really well in a way that, like, as music therapists, it relates more to us. And I think definitely with my like brain, I think a lot of these techniques would work very well for me.
nice.
So yeah, awesome presentation.
Thank you so much, man.
Yeah.
Anyone else? And if you want, like if you're working on something you may be struggling with in your studies, maybe we can, you know, go through it and see how we can break it down uh, to more manageable bite-sized pieces.
I just want to say great presentation. I enjoyed it. Lots of interesting techniques that can be applied to not only music, but other aspects of your life as well. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of couldn't hear you, Adam, but what I heard was that it's helpful for music, but also in general life.
Yeah, sorry. It's my Bluetooth speaker is also doing my audio. I guess I just figured that out. But yeah, definitely some interesting techniques. I enjoyed your presentation and can apply that not only to music, but other aspects in your life. Thank you.
I'm glad you enjoyed, Adam.
Alec, I just want to say that I appreciate your statement at the beginning about kind of ongoing practice. I think it's really easy to lose sight of like, oh yeah, I need to do these things so that I can be better at this, but that most of these kinds of things are things we need to practice on a regular basis throughout our lives. So thank you for that reminder.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's always a process.
We also have a couple of comments in the chat. One says, thank you for this presentation. I will definitely be using many of these techniques.
Nice.
Another says, could this be utilized in a way to decompress from a day at work internship, like the idea of leaving work at work?
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting. I like to use visualization because I find that the things that we say to ourselves and the images that we conjure in our mind really have an impact on our mind and our physiology. So, what I like to do is one technique that I find useful is if there's something that is making me anxious, that's really bothering me, and I realize that it's obstructing my ability to be present or work on whatever I'm working on, then I imagine taking that and putting it in a box and putting it on the shelf. And this for me is I found to be really useful because it's like, okay, I'm not suppressing it, I'm not pushing it away, I'm just putting it in a box so I can deal with it later. So now I can focus on what I'm focusing on right now. I hope that's helpful.
I have a question, Alec, that it might be like, I don't want to put you on the spot or anything, but it just came to my mind that I was like, how do you think, like in your own opinion, like how do you think of these techniques um, is already making you or will make you a better clinician or a better student? Like what has been your experience of maybe some examples of situations that didn't go as well because you didn't apply this and you were able to see the difference both in your experience as a student and also as a future music therapist in maybe your practicum experiences?
Well, I find that in guitar is my principal instrument. So uh, one of my biggest difficulties has been understanding or mapping out all the notes and understanding the matrix of the fretboard. And so what I was doing was, here's a little exercise I was doing was, say I'm in the key of G, and so I'm doing all of the intervals uh, on top of each note. So here's G, and the second would be A. So G and A, and then G and B, and then G and C, then G and D, then G and E, then F sharp, and then G. And this little exercise for me helped me to first like map out all the notes, the names of the frets, and also the notes in relation to that root note. So that way, whenever I see this pattern, say that's a fifth, the next string and two frets down is a fifth. So whenever I see that, it's just like right away, oh, that's a fifth. And so I don't have to think about it or count it or anything. And that has really helped me because I don't have to spend the extra time uh, processing where I could just be doing it. And I think in music therapy, this is super useful because, when we're playing, it's important that I be engaged with you and not be like, oh, what's going on here? You know what I mean? So uh, to be fluent on everything that's going on here is really necessary. Um, I think as a clinician, so that we can, like I said, not spend the time processing this stuff and just being able to focus on you. Um, Also, another thing I found that was to just a quick tip for learning how to engage with you instead of with my guitar is that I learned just take like a progression like C to A minor, and I get the basic movement. Okay, I got it, and then I practice with maybe with my eyes closed or maybe looking away. And then also, what's a really cool exercise is to practice having a conversation with somebody while you're playing the guitar. And that way, you're learning how to separate your ability to play guitar with your ability to speak and engage with another person. So, was that the answer you were looking for, Deanna?
Yeah, it's definitely like it was in your experience, these methods and techniques that you've found, how they benefited your own life. So yeah, thanks.
My pleasure. And Hillary, of the book recommendations, yeah, let me go back there. You can see this, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so the polyvagal theory is super interesting. It's basically talking about um, social engagement and trauma and its effect on developmental psychology and many other things. I'm still diving into the polyvagal theory. The Body Keeps a Score is largely informed by the polyvagal theory, and it's talking about how pretty much the same thing. The significance of social engagement and trauma on people, especially when we're young. And Limitless is a book by Jim Quick. Jim Quick also has some online courses, which I found very useful too. He does like memory techniques, reading, speed reading, and then Victor Wooten. His books are absolutely amazing. It's the music lesson was the first book, which is about basically music and how it relates to our everyday lives. So even people who aren't musicians, I feel, would benefit from this book. And then the spirit of music goes deeper into that. It's for me, it's a uh, mind blowing book. It's amazing. I highly recommend all of these books. Any other questions or comments? Criticisms?
Yeah, I'm gonna send the feedback form link one more time. So again, please fill it out. Same to help Alec and all the rest of the presenters. If you haven't had the chance to write a feedback form for the previous presenters, I really encourage you, since the whole purpose of mini passages is for these students and new professionals to practice presenting and getting feedback and getting better at it, and keep building the field with content for future clinicians and students and all that kind of stuff. So the link is in the chat, and if we don't have any other questions or comments.
If no one has anything else to say, I'd love to end it with a song, if you'd like to hear.
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. So this song came out of, I was thinking, like, who am I really, besides, my biological conditioning, cultural conditioning, etc. But really, who am I? And the song came out. Oh, I'm sitting beside the tree. I'm flowing with the breeze. So what is me? I found myself today, dissolved into the earth. So what is me? And no, I lost myself again. I don't know who I am. So what's a face without a name? And no, I came out from this earth, and I will go back to her. So what is me? I'm like the breeze blowing through the trees. I sing my song and then I'm gone. So what is me? So what is me? Hope you enjoyed it, everybody. Beautiful. Thank you, Caitlin.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Alec. We already got a bunch of virtual claps, but I'm gonna ask it one more time. Thank you so much for these, and thank you from all the NER-AMTAS board for presenting. And then that was our last presentation for today. We have two more tomorrow, one at 11 to 12, and then 12:30 to 1:30. And go ahead and enjoy the rest of your Saturday, and I hope to see you all tomorrow. Bye.